Okay, and all right, we are live. Okay, so I guess yeah, we're live. Thank you. All right, thank you so much for those who have been looking forward for this talk for today. So it's a brand new Wednesday, and indeed, it's a happy new year. Yes, greetings from Let Us Talk It team. Happy holidays and happy new year to everyone. And yeah, we are very excited for this talk that we have. This is the first Let Us Talk It talk for this year. And we have great gentlemen that have joined and accepted the guest invitation to share their knowledge and experience free to everyone. As we believe here in Let Us Talk It team that knowledge should be free and it should be the most valuable thing that is shared to everyone. So this initiative, Let Us Talk It, free knowledge sharing platform, is made possible by Cogent Integrated Business Solutions. So they're an IT company based in Detroit, Michigan, and yeah, they believe that knowledge should be free. Hence, they initiated this one, which covers diverse topics from different experts that we are really willing to share their experience and knowledge in this platform. So those who are watching live on Facebook and YouTube, please stand by. And then if you have any questions, just put it on chat or in comment. So our speakers can address. And yeah, today this is your host for Let Us Talk It. I am Phil, and for the first topic that we have today is we have how organizations address workforce expectations for Gen Z and millennials. So this is a discussion that focuses on how Gen Z and millennials are changing the corporate world with how they expect to work and what they expect from organizations in order to continue working for these organizations. And also, our speaker will provide guidance on what Gen Z and millennials can do in order to meet their demands and how organizations can accommodate. And with us is a Gen Z and millennial expert, Dr. Jason Wiggins, who is an author of the book Millennial Leadership: How to Understand, Retain, and Motivate Millennial Leaders, along with being a keynote speaker and university professor who has been exploring multi generations for almost 15 years, including Gen Z and millennials retention and motivation with different industries. And his experience spans for over 20 or more years in progressive management roles while conducting extensive studies on millennials and Gen Zs in the workplace. And he continued research includes the ability to understand, retain, motivate millennials and Gen Zs with the classroom and the workforce. And without further ado, we bring you Dr. Jason Wiggins to deliver the topic. Please
Well,
take
thank you
over.
very much, Phil. It's a pleasure. And thank you for the nice introduction. And welcome to the listeners and Happy New Year to everybody. As Phil mentioned, the topic of today is basically how organizations address workforce expectations for Gen Z and millennials. And I think right before we get into that, I think it's important to understand the generations because there may be some folks out there that don't understand where certain generations fall in within the years. And so let's start out with the baby boomers. The baby boomers were born between 1945 and 1964, and they were basically captured by the Vietnam War, and that was kind of the pinnacle years for them. So that's kind of where they defined the cutoff. Generations usually have some defining moment within the generation, and then after that you have the Gen X's, which is kind of the forgotten generation because there was the fewest generation of all the individuals, and they are ranged from roughly 1965 until 1980. Then you have the millennials, to 1979. Then you have the millennials from 1980 to roughly 1996. And now you have Gen Z from 1997 to around 2012. And we have a current generation that is not in the workforce, they're in the school system, and that is Generation Alpha. And they are, like I said, from 2013 to current. So it's just important to understand the generations. And then we need to talk about, as each generation continues to move forward, they continue to have more resources, they're more intelligent, they are really defining how we do things in the workplace and at the corporate level. So, how it used to be with baby boomers, basically, you would say, I need you to jump. And the baby boomer would say, how high? The way it works now is if you ask a millennial or a Gen Z to jump, they will go, why? Why is it important? Is there a reason behind it? How is it going to benefit me? How is it going to benefit the organization? And so the way we do work now is not the same as being directive. It's about participatory type of, being able to get in the wheelhouse of a Gen Z and millennial so they understand that what they are doing is vital. And so we are at a time now, as of recent, we had the great resignation in 2022. And that's where 4 million people left their jobs, particularly with the most of them being Gen Z and millennials, because they're not going to continue working the way the baby boomers did, and to a certain degree, Gen X did. So we're kind of in a crisis mode if you look at it from an organization standpoint, because an organization utilizes monetary resources, knowledge resources, and all these different type of resources that cost the organization substantial amount of money. So what needs to happen, corporate organizations need to stop rolling over dead. They cannot have their head in the sand any longer, because 65% of Gen Z and millennials currently are brushing up their resume or looking for jobs, or if it's about 11 a.m., they may actually have a new job by 12 o'clock. That is the reality of the Gen Z and millennial workforce. They are not going to continue to be okay with substandard type of employers. So if you really want to attract, retain, and motivate Gen Z and millennials, then you're going to have to start defining different ways to do that. And that's something we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what are some defining ways where we can determine there can be a mutual agreement between the employee, the Gen Z and millennial, and the employer, the organization, and the corporation. And so you have to find ways to improve. And there are a lot of different variety of ways. There's no one size fits all. You can do it by having flexibility within the workforce. Flexibility could be hybrid, remote. You could have a mixture of both where you agree every Friday, you work from home. Now, there are some jobs that you do have to be on the production line or the service side where unfortunately you cannot have those type of remote duties. But don't worry, in about 10 years from now, we won't get into this subject today, but AI will take over 20% of those jobs. So that's going to help the situation in the future when it comes to being more hybrid, being more remote. But at this point in time, we do need to find ways where we can have flexible, maybe 4-day work weeks. We've seen a lot of organizations go to 4-day work weeks, 10 hours a day, because we still need productivity. And you do have to have work and life balance with that flexibility. But the work and life balance to the organization means you have to entrust your employees to know that they are putting in the time at home during those remote settings. But what's key is your normal 9 to 5 job is not currently what's desired by the workforce. So you have to understand that maybe they work from 9 to 12, but then later the day, they work from 4 to 9. As long as they're getting the job done and they're meeting the demands of what they need to do, then that flexibility is going to be huge. Another aspect of flexibility is job sharing. Job sharing will allow you to hire two part-time employees, and maybe they work 20 hours a week, each one, but that provides them the flexibility that they need. Maybe they have what you deem side hustles. You're seeing a lot of Gen Z and millennials utilize that flexibility for side hustles to be able to do some of the other things that are important to them. And that's really part of that flexibility, is providing the time for them to have that mental health, that ability to unwind, to take a deep breath, and do what they love. I know Google incorporates one work day a week where that employee can work on any project that they want during that one day, because it's part of what they desire, what they want, and it makes them feel like they have some empowerment over their employer. And now let's get into culture. Culture, we talked about flexibility. Now, culture is something that if you don't have a good culture, you will not have a good employee base. Now, what's really important is if you're able to be an organization that provides a culture that is dynamic, that provides employee engagement, that incorporates diversity, inclusiveness, social responsibility, climate awareness, all of these things, this is going to really demonstrate to your employees that you are really walking the talk. Because I worked for organizations that say, oh, we do this, we do that. They put it on their website to showcase many of the things that they do, but they're not walking the talk. They're showcasing, they're providing that information, but what they're not doing is being transparent to the members of their team. Because internally, you can see what's really going on. Maybe externally, out in the public, it may look like a great organization that embraces all of these important elements, but they don't really practice what they say. So again, culture has to be dynamic. You have to show appreciation for your employees. You have to be able to demonstrate that what's important to them is also important to you. So if the climate is important, you need to demonstrate that. If being able to be flexible in your work, you need to show that you're willing to do that. And think about this. Employees, especially Gen Z and millennials, believe that any employment over 1 year is considered long-term employment. Over 1 year. So if you're a hiring individual, you're looking at that going, that's very concerning. So if they consider 1 year, does that mean within 2 years that they'll be gone? And the answer to that is yes. The majority of individuals, specifically Gen Z and millennials, do not work over a 2-year mark. Why? Because they weren't being fulfilled by their employer. They weren't getting the desired results. They weren't getting the growth, the development training, because 2/3 of Gen Z and millennials believe that training and development is very, very important to them. And if you're not able to meet that, then they're going to go somewhere else where they can continue to learn and develop their tools. And that's another thing, is sometimes they consider millennials and Gen Zs job hoppers, because that actually started with the Gen Xers. As I mentioned, they were born between 1965 and 1979. The reason why they started job hopping was because they observed their parents, the baby boomers, working for organizations for 25, 30 years, and being very dedicated, and then they saw them lose their job. So that's when they realized, guess what? Corporate doesn't care about me, as a Gen Xer. So I'm going to find out what helps me moving forward with my career. And then what you've seen is that transition from millennials to Gen Zs. They've all kind of followed suit, except now Gen Z is kind of starting to peel the onion back a little bit. They're starting to desire stability a little bit more than millennials. Why? Because we've had the recession, we've had the inflation. So they're looking at, well, maybe stability is more important. But I will say that's not going to be a long-term solution, because as I see forward, I still think that stability is going to go right back into job hopping once the economy does improve. So again, we talked about the importance of flexibility, talked about the importance of culture, and then we've diving into, like I said, growth and development learning. And then the one way you can help these individuals continue to learn is through reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is where it gives that talented, intellectual Gen Z or millennials the ability to help teach maybe a Gen Xer or a baby boomer on how to do things. So this helps them feel like they are a bigger part of the organization. They're not just the young up and coming talent. They are actually somebody that is going to be a big force within the organization. So we've talked about how to retain employees, talent, resources. We need to kind of talk about the importance of attracting, bringing them on board if you're an organization. Well, if you want to attract Gen Z and millennials, you need to utilize all the different type of resources available. See, when baby boomers and Gen X's were growing up, we were looking at the newspaper ads where it said help wanted. Help wanted said, okay, needed somebody for this. Well, now you have all of these different type of job placement boards via online. You have to find out different ways to meet what Gen Z and millennials are looking for when they are looking for a job. So you want to get all the different type of resources that are going to allow for that. And then once you're able to attract those individuals, you need to find a way to onboard them with that desire to show that they are somebody that's going to be a big part of your organization. So you can have virtual onboarding. You need to stay connected from the get-go. So you need to show that, okay, we're not just bringing you on to be another cog in the wheel of our production. We want to show you that we value the tools that you're going to bring to us, and this is how we're going to continue to onboard you, show that you're desired. And that includes daily, weekly check-ins. You want to have your 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, 6 months, annual reviews. And reviews don't always mean a salary increase. All they mean is that you are connected with the employee, because the number one rule, you may have heard this, employees don't leave the company, they leave their bosses. Why? Because their bosses are the one that has the highest impact on their career by showing the employee, the Gen Z and millennial, that they care about what they're doing, that they find themselves to be a valuable piece of the puzzle, and that they will be rewarded. Now, when I say rewarded, that also means that they are compensated appropriately. The benefits are outlined appropriately. And that's another thing right there, is when you're onboarding, it is important to ensure that the offer letter, the benefits, everything is explained in detail, so there is no surprises when that first check comes. Because imagine when your first check comes and you see something that was not detailed in the offer letter or was incorrect, and they don't fix it, that's going to be an automatic number one result to leave. And as I mentioned, that ability to retain is important because it will cost an employer 2 to 3 times the employee's salary to go back, find a new job posted, and then be able to lose that knowledge attainment that they had over that time. You have to attract, hire, onboard, train a new employee, and they don't even have that same specific knowledge. So customer service may take a hit within your organization. Culture may take a hit within your organization. Why? Because when a valued employee leaves, guess what? All the other employees see it and they go, why did that person leave? Were they terminated? Did they leave because they weren't happy? What is the organization not doing right? And so going back to what we talked about, it's important you have a mutual agreement, a mutual understanding, almost a mutual contract between the employer and the Gen Z and millennial employee. And so Gen Z and millennials understand that they have enormous tools and talents. They have been brought up by having all the resources available. Everybody has YouTube University. Now, you do have to pick and choose which one you may find more important or actually relevant, but you do have all those resources. My 7-year-old son knows more than I did when I was 15. Why? Because he has all of these tools available that he wants to watch and learn from. So work is a mutual consideration, and communication is the key for Gen Z and millennials that are employed to receive the rewards they desire from the organization. So let's talk about what millennials and Gen Zs bring to the organization. They bring a wealth of talent. They bring optimism. They bring real life experiences. They've all experienced either 9/11, the Great Recession, they've inflation, global stuff. So they've all had part of this issues that have defined them. Oh, how can I forget the pandemic? These kids were in school during their pivotal high school years for 2+ years where they weren't able to communicate with others. They were maybe work remotely, which goes back to the demand to work remotely. So all of these type of events have really made an impact on Gen Z and millennials and organizations. So now it is time for the organizations to step up, as I mentioned, stop rolling over playing dead, and get their head out of the sand and realize that this is our future. We need to cater our workforce while still keeping the productivity that we had, but we need to find a way to work with our newer Gen Z and millennial employees by cultivating flexibility, culture, values, inclusion, growth, development, learning, and being transparent with benefits and salary, along with onboarding and retaining and continuing to motivate that employee. So again, I appreciate everybody's time today, and I thank you very much for letting me have the opportunity to utilize this platform.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Wiggins, for that wonderful talk. It's really relatable. Like, I wonder before, I was only like a year or two to last with the companies I've been with. And yeah, that's me. It's actually right. The management, it affects your performance or your mindset in staying with the company. Cogent has been the longest company that I've been with, and I'm still with them now. So that only prompts one information. I've got good bosses. All right. So yes, and recognizing we have the CEO of Cogent here, Sir Srini Tanta, joining us. So if you have any insights or questions, sir, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jason. Again, I think nice connecting with you again, I guess. It's great insights. A very important topic for all the companies. Thank you for doing this.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So, any questions from the attendees? Checking the lives. We don't have any question yet on YouTube and Facebook. All right. Just do you have anything to promote, Dr. Wiggins?
Yeah, sure. A couple things. One is if your readers are interested, I do have a book that you mentioned. It's can't really see it through. It's how to understand, retain, and motivate Gen Y leaders, millennial leadership. And the book is based on understanding the background and theoretic conditions for millennial leaders. And it bases the important 7 concepts of how to attract, retain, and motivate Gen Y leaders. So you can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any other platform where you purchase books. And then at the same time, I'd love to invite all your listeners to my podcast that I host. It is your motivational Gen Z and millennial expert podcast. And we always talk about things that are relevant to Gen Z and millennials. But the important part of that, we always have a positive spin. So we don't only want you to learn about Gen Z and millennials and those organizations that employ them. We want you to be motivated by the time you leave the discussion. So it's about a resource of making sure that you're energized, you're ready to conquer that next step that you're moving forward. And feel free to email me at jason@genzandmillennialexpert.com or my website, which is jasonwigginsphd.com or genzandmillennialexpert.com.
And there you go. Thank you so much, Kerwigan. So for those who will be watching this live or recorded session later on, so those are the contact details. Please feel free to get in touch with Dr. Wiggins for if you have some offline topics you need to discuss. All right. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Wiggins. We shall be going to or moving to the next topic that we have today. All right, and yes, okay, it's on the chat. All right. And yeah, we have a two-word topic for the second discussion. We have executive presence. So a little mysterious right, with regards to the whole uh word of the talk. And we have here this is a webinar that explores the necessary new skills and strategies essential for developing a commanding confident presence in the rapidly changing corporate world. And yes, we welcome you into this second topic for this session and learn how to effectively communicate, inspire confidence in others, and lead with authenticity and influence in any professional setting. And this topic will be given to us by recurring speakers as well, Sir Bradley Dennis McDevitt, who is a seasoned development coach and professor of depth psychology and Pacifica Graduate Institute. And with over 30 years in theater performance and has combines his expertise in Lecoq style theatrical techniques and depth psychology to enhance emotional intelligence, somatic awareness, and metacognition through his innovative theater of self program. And without further ado, we have here Sir Bradley Dennis. Please take over, sir.
Certainly. Thank you, Phil. Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to see you all and to be here again. And thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And Dr. Wiggins, that was a wonderful talk and surprisingly salient to what I'm about to talk towards. So I will share my screen with you and just want to make sure that everyone can see that.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Great. So let's see. We'll go, I've kind of expanded the topic a little bit I call it the new executive presence, cultivating transformative or transformational leadership. And the reason why it's particularly salient to what Dr. Wiggins is talking about with new generations coming into the workforce and demanding different environments and different types of qualities of leadership, that this puts new demands on how leadership moves forward in the world, what kind of skills they need to cultivate, and how to motivate their employees moving forward, how to motivate themselves. So we're talking about the key word here is presence and how to cultivate that. Specifically, though, executive presence, which is kind of an odd term. So I'll give you a little bit of an intro to myself. We'll talk a little bit about how executive presence or leadership presence has changed over the last even 10 years. We'll talk about this idea of what transformational leadership actually means, specifically as is germane to Dr. Wiggins' topic of how to encourage and engage younger people whose values are very different than what we've experienced and corporate world has experienced in the past. And then we'll look at, just because we have limited time, sort of basic first steps of how to cultivate this in yourself, how to practice that, the things you can kind of look toward to create this more engaging presence with yourself and with others, especially as is germane to leadership and to the new executive. So just to give you a little bit of background on me, my name is Bradley, and probably the biggest interest that I've had for the last 30 years has been theater, but more specific is how theater and how actor training skills engender and encourage being present with ourselves and being present with the world. And my coaching and consulting practice has been focused on how to kind of harness these skills of cultivating presence for ourselves and with others, and to apply that to non-actor, I hate that term, to non-actor populations, corporations, businesses, nonprofits, but also in one-to-one coaching, just to help people become more present with themselves, help reduce anxiety, help reduce depression, and to be more forward in their meaning making and sense making. So that's really what's behind this whole process for me. And then, of course, my big focus is about adult development and helping adults in particular reconnect to the creative energies that help kind of make life more interesting and meaningful. So that's kind of an overview of what I'm about and where we're going. So let's start with this question of what is presence. And I picked this photo because it's so engaging. Just take a second and look at it. I feel a real sense of being drawn in. I feel a sense of openness. The expressions on these three children is friendly, it's engaging, it's open, it's positive, it's warm, loving. There's a real sense of play. And I picked this in particular because of what it kind of brings out in me when I think about this term presence. So let's look at that specifically. What presence is composed of? And I picked as many A words as I could because it just seemed to work well. Attention, right? Presence is sitting with our attention, this limited resource that we have, this finite resource that every day we have to go to sleep in order to rejuvenate, right? Where we are spending this precious resource is a big part of what presence implies. Do we throw it away? Are we very judicious with it and how we move it around? It also implies awareness of ourselves, awareness of our thoughts, emotions, the internal landscape that's constantly changing and moving around. But it also implies an awareness of the world, right? And an awareness of others, an awareness of the environment, an awareness of situational awareness, all these sorts of things. And then that third A, availability. This is an interesting word because with attention and awareness, that's fine. But if you're not available to what is, either internally or externally, you're not really able to take action on these things. And so you may be present, but you're not able to affect change. So this availability and agency are both affected by presence. Agency is really the ability to affect change. And then affordance. This is an interesting word as well. Affordance means, well, if we're talking about money or finances, is what you can buy, right? What you can actually bring in or bring on board. The same is true with your attention, with presence. What does it afford you, right? If you're very present, if you're very focused, I call it omnidirectional presence, this ability to be in tune with what's happening internally as well as what's happening externally, and to see how each affects and changes the other. That availability, agency, awareness, and attention affords more engagement. It affords more information. It affords more opportunity. So these 5 A's, I may have to do something here with the alliteration later, really is sort of the fundamental components of what it means when we talk about presence. So now we'll talk about executive presence because it's a little different. And this information and perspective comes from Sylvia Ann Hewlett, who has a wonderful Google Talk. I think it was in 2012, where she's talking about the qualities of executive presence. She just literally, I believe, last month or in the last couple of months, published another article in Harvard Business Review about what's changed. So we'll go over those because it's extremely salient to this topic, especially as Dr. Wiggins was talking about what we need to do to make our work environments, the corporations, the business culture more inviting and sustainable for new populations as they join the workforce. So executive presence typically has meant this sense of gravitas. There's a great quote, and I think it's Asimov, who says, everything in the universe has a center of gravity, has a gravitational mass. Some people more than others. And you can tell when a person with a specific kind of gravitas or presence enters the room, you feel it. There's a shift of energy. There's an engagement. There's an attraction. So gravitas is this sense of being with your being, right? So there's that presence thing. For the last 75 years or so, this has really been sort of the fundamental muscle of the corporate executive, is this sense of gravitas, this sense of appearance, an ability to communicate ideas, this talent, your experience, and also this independent, this is a very American notion, but very much Western, this independence, right? This pioneer ethic, this, I have an idea, I'm going to push it forward. It's an entrepreneurial drive. But that's really what we looked for when we talked about executive presence, was these sort of figurehead kinds of qualities. And it makes sense because for the very longest time, that environment was predominantly run by men, and predominantly white men for the most part. And this was the narrative that was cultivated there. Well, that's changed considerably. So let's look at what's different. So as Dr. Wiggins was talking, one of the things that employees, that managers, that people are looking for from a leader are senses of inclusion, a sense of engagement, a sense of listening. So certainly gravitas, you want to be led by people who you want to follow. You want to be attracted to them. You want to be engaged and inspired by their ideas. But that's not all that there is, because as we just heard, we want to empower those things for ourselves as well. Everybody wants to have those kinds of things. So the new executive presence really focuses on communicating a vision and a collaborative energy that relies on storytelling. It relies on ability to communicate a vision and to inspire others, right? So we heard that before. It also implies leaning into this very, very important new world word, which is diversity, inclusivity, bringing people in, this understanding that the leading edge of innovation and novel idea generation always comes from outliers. It comes from the edges, from the periphery. So if you're a hermetically sealed organization used to doing things in a very specific way, and that's how we do it, and we don't change, things will atrophy very quickly because you're not pulling in the energy from the periphery. So this idea of listening and this term holding space, right, which is really just a fancy way of saying listening actively and engaging someone, letting them know that you're aware, right? These very basic fundamental principles of what it means to talk with one another. And then, of course, this idea of intellectual agility, this idea that I'm not fixed in how I think about problems. I have an expansive set of tools that looks all over the place for how to find solutions. Another one is celebrating small victories, and we'll go through some of the details of what this looks like. But this idea, like Dr. Wins was talking about, of celebrating both victories, but also creating a space where people feel free to experiment, explore, and fail. That one's crucial. The ability to fail without fear, right? To try new things without fear of looking silly or being fired, right? Google, I think Dr. Wins mentioned, has the 80-20 rule where 20% of your time you work on whatever you want. What an amazing fundamental difference in just a corporate structure that really empowers people to explore and to try new things. Let's take a second. This is one of the fundamental aspects of presence, is being with the body. So let's just think, breathe. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of transformational leadership, because that's really the heart of this new executive presence. Is what does it mean to create an environment, create a culture where people feel a sense of engagement, a sense of purpose, meaning, play, enjoyment, support, all of those things. So let's dive into what that kind of looks like. The first one I mentioned is this idea of communicating your vision. Compelling vision created through stories, crafting a shared sense of purpose, right? This ties into Simon Sinek's Start With Why. If you can communicate your why, like Dr. Wiggins said, that's half the battle right there. If you can communicate and link into that sense, that intrinsic sense of this is why I'm here, right? That's going to carry your younger, your millennials, your Gen Zs so much further. And I mean, Phil might be able to talk about this. He's been with Cogent for a while. I'm curious what's kept him there. I imagine it's a sense of engagement, a sense of purpose, being heard, being listened to. We'll talk about that afterwards, Phil. That's great. There it is again, building trust. So new leadership demands that you demonstrate reliability, demands that you demonstrate authenticity, which is kind of an interesting word. It's one of those buzzwords that people have been talking about for a while now. Authenticity. I think when we say authenticity, what we really mean is being honest, is being real. There's no facades. You're showing up as you are. That also implies creating safe spaces, like I mentioned, for expression, risk-taking, failure. And by doing that, you create change agents. And what that means in the culture is people who have your back and who have the back of your vision, of your why, right? So part of this also is about empowering leadership. And we do that at every level of the organization, whether it's the C-suite executives or, your managerial staff or, your first reports. Everybody, when they're empowered with these basic tools, will rise to the occasion. And that's how you create change agents. So I mentioned cultivating diversity. This is where the growing edge is. And we see it in so many struggling organizations who have this lip service to, yes, this is what everyone's saying we need to do, DEI. But when it really comes to putting the rubber on the road, it's tough. It's difficult. These are hard conversations to have. And it requires that we admit, we show up with a little bit of vulnerability to say, I need help. I want to lean into this, and I want you to come in and join the conversation. So that nurturing resilience starts with the executive. It starts with the top down, right? So next is this idea of collaboration. When you bring people in, when you empower these people, when you build trust, when you create visionary leadership and you share that vision, what you're doing is creating this environment of hyper collaboration. I think I jumped ahead a little bit. I'll join in. You can also create celebratory moments with this collaboration, right? When you break down silos, when you kind of tear down walls and allow people to cultivate ideas in the organization or even outside the organization, depending on who the stakeholders are, you create momentum, you create leverage points. And in those wins, even if it's someone's failure, wow, I learned 20 new ways not to do that well. That's great. We can throw those off the table and celebrate that progress. So transformational leadership requires seeing people and seeing their achievements as well as the failures, as well as the efforts. That's part of this new culture that's coming out. Systems thinking. Systems thinking just means understanding interconnectedness. I think my last talk for Cogent for Let's Talk It, I was talking a little bit about the work of Dr. Ian McGilchrist and the left and right hemisphere hypothesis, and how so much of our systems thinking, especially in the business world, in corporate structure, is left brain dominated, which is black and white thinking. It's very fixed. It has preconceived notions about how things are supposed to be, as opposed to our right minds, our right brains, which see interrelatedness, interconnectedness. Those so we need both, obviously, the left and the right, but pattern recognition and seeing the relationships for whole systems thinking is really important here. And of course, I mentioned that intellectual agility, this constant desire to improve, to grow, to learn, that in our leadership encourages and demonstrates that ability, that flexibility, that metacognitive drive to be curious. Because like Dr. Woods again was saying, younger people are leaving these organizations after a year, 2 years tops. Why? Most likely because they're bored. Most likely because they're not learning, they're not growing, they don't have trust. All of these things are not present. But when you have that sense of curiosity, boredom goes away, right? There's I saw this was a refrigerator magnet that said the only cure for boredom is curiosity. And there's no cure for curiosity. So the key here is cultivating an environment where people are curious, where they're asking questions, where they want the knowledge, they want the wisdom. And then finally is this idea of radical self-reliance in the organization, which is adaptability. Being able to see and choose structures and to be able to modify and to change, because we're in such a dynamic time right now. And the amount of change that's going to happen to organizations will be exponential, I think, certainly in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to blow everyone's socks off. So the organization that thrives in change, that embraces ambiguity and uses that as a design parameter, really is going to not only thrive, but also attract the people who do well in those situations. And guess what? They tend to be younger. They tend to be more flexible of mind, and they need these things. So again, take a breath. So as we're diving into this, it's useful to just remember what these basic areas of focus are when we're talking about cultivating executive presence. It starts with the individual. It starts with the body. It starts with the mind. It starts with what's happening on the interior of the person, in this case, the executive, the leader. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things to be aware of is that attention is a finite resource. And we hear so often about executives experiencing burnout. Stress levels are through the roof, right? They're working 16, 18-hour days. They have a vision that initially guided them, but that vision's been watered down because they have so many direct reports, so many things to do. They're trying to get so many things done that tends to start pulling them out of the body, out of the mind, out of presence with themselves. And now they've got all of these things to take care of. So I remember seeing once, and I can't remember exactly where it was like a day diary of two executives. One who really focused on presence with themselves, and another who was really focused on some of the more sort of alpha old school mentalities of being driven. And the punchline was, at the end of the day, the executive who focused on presence and really set boundaries with themselves and has a ritual or a practice of connecting with the mind, connecting with the body, connecting with their emotional landscape, practicing their own communication and being in presence with other people, their health, their well-being, their longevity, their communication, their pretty much across the board, all of their metrics improve. Whereas the person who, burns the candle at both ends and pushes themselves, there's two things happening. One is that's unsustainable, and we see that time and time again where people burn out. But the second is that you're demonstrating, again, the model of how you want other people to behave. So when we look at that, right, all of the things, the negative behaviors associated with that, negative behaviors that most Gen Z and millennials are avoiding, are concomitant with those old ways of doing things. And that if we want to invite people, we want to encourage, we want to retain staff, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with this sense of being present with what is here and in the organization. So some of the first steps, and I'm just blown by this stuff. I have lots of other information. So if you're interested in getting more of that, I've got a QR code at the end of this. You can lean into that and we can have more conversations. But the first step here is finding an embodied wisdom practice. This is a term from Dr. John Vervaeke. He's a psychology professor at the University of Toronto, that a yoga, a martial arts, some kind of a physical activity that is fully immersive, that brings you into your body, where to the exclusion of all else, you're not thinking about work, you're not thinking about home, you're just thinking about being, is fundamental to cultivating this sense of engagement with yourself. Mindfulness practice. Now, mindfulness is just kind of a Western version of some Buddhist and Eastern meditation practices that are sort of separated from the religious dogma in that particular practice. But it's really just about cultivating this sense of being still. Sometimes it's a recitation of a repetitive rhythmic kind of chant. Sometimes it's in silence. Sometimes there's walking or moving meditations. There's all sorts of things. But again, it's about making time for stillness, quiet, so that we have those moments. It's like being bored when you're a kid. Those are often some of the moments where the biggest ideas come out of. Then there's creative pursuits. What are you doing that's outside of work, outside of family, that's just creative for you, that's engaging, that's renewing, that's something that puts your energy towards making, towards learning. And then the final one, this is easy. You can do it at any time. You can do it right now, is to engage beauty. What does it mean? It means to stop what you're doing, consciously look around and find something that you find is beautiful and observe it and dig into that. Why do I find it beautiful? What is it? Because the fundamental mirror, if you will, of presence and of attention is that attention is a creative act. So the things that we find beautiful, we find them beautiful in the world because they reflect us. Same thing when we see something ugly, demonstrably disgusting, or that we feel a sense of revulsion to, that comes from us as well. So this idea of engaging beauty and engaging curiosity is a fundamental way of engaging our own metacognitive abilities. That's the space between stimulus and action or response, right? And so in stressed, anxious people, that space is very small. Stimulus, response, stimulus, response. And what we're looking for by engaging beauty, curiosity, creative pursuits, mindfulness practice is creating space between the stimulus and our response. And that's really what this work is about. And that when you cultivate that for yourself as an executive, as a leader, you begin this journey of opening and demonstrating first to yourself and then to the people you lead and care about exactly what it is that you would hope for them as well. One more time to breathe. Thank you. So I want to thank you guys for your attention and for the invitation. It's always wonderful to be here with you. I hope you found this useful. This is a QR code to go directly to carolinacommons.org, which is my consulting company. If you're interested in talking more about this, you can also find me on LinkedIn and all the socials. But it's a pleasure being here with you. And if you have any questions, looking forward to hearing them. But otherwise, thank you again, and Happy New Year to you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sir Bradley. That was really a wonderful talk. Yeah, it may be somehow correlated, but it's not totally an overlap. It's still a very wonderful talk that you have given. As Sir Srini as well said, there are great points, and as always, wonderful. So yeah, most of those both topics are really timely and relatable. So that's what this initiative is all about. And yes, by the way, do you have anything to promote as well, Sir Bradley?
Just my website and my coaching practice. I still have a couple of open slots if people are interested in one-on-one coaching or for group coaching. But yep, just my presence. That's it.
All right, that's perfect. So yes, yes. Dr. Wiggins said as well. The presentation was very insightful. And checking on the streams right now, we don't have any chat so far. Yeah, they were watching, but yeah, no chat. So that was really crisp and clear. Thank you so much for delivering those wonderful words and insights into this platform. So this really gives the motivation as well for those who are like me, who really are learning from this webinar. So as you mentioned before, yes, I stayed with Cogent for a while now, really, because like the executives really like the especially Sarah Srini as well, really allowed me to grow with the company. I did not start this way. I was not really into the online presence, showing my face, talking, and all sorts. But yeah, they gave me room to grow, to learn. They give me suggestions. They give me advices as well, and they allow me to fail. And yes, that's really what I have learned, and it was said as well in the talk. So thank you so much for bringing that one up to the table. So such great talks from both speakers, Sir Bradley and Dr. Wiggins. So I guess it's about time. And thank you so much for those who are watching on live. Uh, Also, who will be watching this recorded session later on. So just leave your chat or comments there if you have any. And then as if you have to review this recorded session, so you can get in touch with our esteemed speakers. They are very responsive uh, on LinkedIn or in their socials. So feel free to do so to collaborate with them or share offline talks with them as well. So once again, from Let Us Talk It team, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, speakers, Sir Bradley and Dr. Wiggins, for bringing those here in our platform. And as much as I have learned, also those who will be watching this will learn so much. And yeah, we wish you well, and see you again in the next webinar episode that we have next Wednesday, the same time, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So keep safe, everyone, as always, from Let Us Talk It team. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Bradley. That was amazing. I don't think we could have orchestrated a more perfect